And welcome once again. This is Meepa Radio with your host, Kermit the Frog. Welcome to the second webcam video. The topic of discussion for today is going to be a brief, by brief I mean, less than 15,000 hours of conversation on the topic of racism. And how it affects us just as people. So if you've really ever been anyplace, you've experienced this. You've experienced like maybe a bullying nature or violent action or stereotypes or whatever. And now you know what? I'm gonna talk about two things in this podcast. I'm gonna talk about actual racism, number one, and number two, I'm going to talk about how a lot of people have become kind of pansies when it comes to this kind of stuff, like being oversensitive. So in the topic of racism, yes, it's a very real thing. You know, people have been racist for a long time against whoever. It doesn't mean, it's like blacks versus whites or so-and-so versus so-and-so. It's been happening for quite a long time now, and I think that it's time that we just end all the bullshit and we just say, you know what? You're not that different from me. I'm not that different from you. We're all from the same planet. We're all human beings here, just because your skin color is different from mine or that your ancestors came from a different area of the world than mine did, that means that I have to hate you or I have to treat you any differently. Or that because you don't speak the same language that I do, I'm going to treat you any differently for being in my neighborhood. Now, this is not to say that, people should be leery or wary of anybody else. It's or like with immigration or anything like that. See, now the way that I see it is kind of down to the basic level. The way that I see it is this. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So, in keeping with that ideology, you kind of have to look at it like this. If someone was going to cross the border into another country, let's say I'm going to go move to another country, okay? You got to look at it like this. If I'm going to go someplace else and they don't speak English or they just speak some other language, like if I went to move to South America or I went to live in Spain, say, like I know a lot of other countries, they do speak English too. Like in Canada, they speak English and French. So, I would go there and I would visit, or maybe if I moved to Canada, there's a lot of people that also speak English, and I'm not going to just, all of a sudden want to learn French. I would try and learn some French just so I could make it, I could be courteous of this new land that I'm calling home, and to kind of benefit everybody else, just so that it can be a little bit more comfortable for everybody around me, so that I can better integrate with the society. That's how I would do it. I wouldn't show up expecting a house, expecting a job, expecting someone to do something for me simply because I decided to go over there. Okay, so you got to look at it this way. Like I'm from America. That's who I identify with. I'm American. I'm a human. That's how I say these things. When I was growing up, I went to school with so many different people, different nationalities. They're all from all over the place. Like when I was in high school, I had friends that were from Dominican Republic, they were from Spain, they were from South America, they were from Guatemala, they were from Colombia, they were from France. You never really know, and it doesn't really matter to me. I knew a kid who's from Uganda. I thought that was pretty cool. And my discussion wasn't like, or my train of thought, it wasn't like, well, you need to get out of my country then, because I don't own this country. Nobody owns land the way that we say that we own land. If you look at real estate law, I'm just going to break off here for a second. If you look at real estate law, when you own land, you own everything under that land and everything above that land. So you own the air above your house or your property line. You own every bit of earth crust and mantle and everything down to the center of the planet from your plot line. That's what you own according to real estate law. And I don't know. I don't think that's exactly right. Like you can be a property owner, you can be a landowner, and as far as the legal stuff is concerned, yeah, it's yours. You can do what you want on your land, but that land was bought with money that, if the earth was able to speak your language, she'd be like, wait a minute. So you took some silk and you took some biological tree matter and you mashed it up and put it into a little rectangle piece of paper with some ink on it, and you bought me with this. So you made this from me and then bought this from somebody else with me. You see how silly that sounds? And the same way goes for the idea of racism, the idea that we're all separate, or the idea that we are so fundamentally different because we come from another area, or we come from a different family background or genealogical background or whatever. Why? Why is that the case? And I think it rises a lot from the fear of the unknown, because we as humans, we don't understand enough about ourselves to really call ourselves different. Until someone can tell me, like, oh, well, this group of people over here, their skeletal structure is drastically different, their brains are different, they don't even look or speak or feel or anything like us, so we're different than them, and we're better than them, or we're different from them, or whatever it happens to be. I mean, if you look at anything, any living thing on this entire planet, look at it. They have bodily systems the same as we do, even ants. Ants are more friendly and social than we are. Now, if you look at like their little political system, yeah, they're like communist, socialist, whatever you want to call it, but ants in a colony don't necessarily look at another ant and be like, I don't like you. You're from another colony. You eat different sand than I do. You carry different leaves than I do. So I'm going to kill you. You like what kind of sugar? Well, I only eat organic sugar over here, okay? So you can go take your white sugar from Domino and you can go shove that up your thorax. They don't do that. We shouldn't either. Now, I have a couple of stories. Story time. I have a couple of stories here that I wanna give you now. I myself, I identify very much as just a human of this planet, and my background comes from Canada, comes from Europe, like Italy. I'm Italian. That's where my bloodlines will trace from, but where I trace from is Massachusetts. That's where I was born. So I was born in America. I identify as someone who's native to here. Me, like myself. I come from this land. I'm not from anywhere else. So when someone says to me, hey, white boy, hey, whitey, whatever it happens to be. I've never been called gringo. That would be a really cool. I just like the word gringo. It sounds like one of those little. Remember Banjo-Kazooie? Those little colorful bird-like things. I forget what they call them, like zingos or something. It makes me think of them. So I'm like, ha, gringo. Sounds like those things from Banjo-Kazooie. Remember N64? It was a really cool game. It was like a bear and a bird, and the bird was in the backpack, and you get to a certain level in the castle, and there was like a whole beach, and you could fly around as the bird. And the rest of the time you were Banjo the bear, or Kazooie the bird, Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I've never been called gringo, but I've usually been called white boy or hippie, whatever. I mean, I don't take it as an insult. Really, I just don't understand really where it comes from. I don't understand. It's not like I would walk up to somebody who has a different skin color than me and address them by their skin color. It doesn't make much sense to me where that whole idea comes from. Well, I know where it comes from, but I just don't understand why that's used so often, And it's especially with stereotypes, like, oh, Asians can't drive, and, they're really good at math. And like, oh, white people, they love Starbucks, and, your average white girl wears UGG boots and yoga pants and North Face jackets and drinks spiced pumpkin lattes in the fall. While this may be true of some women, the calling like a basic white girl, you know, there have been many YouTube videos that glorify this, and many YouTube videos that just make fun of it. And what I do is I laugh at everybody. I laugh at myself. I think people are genuinely funny, and it doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, nothing. I don't think that race exists. I think that we're all humans, and that's, if you want to really call it a race, we're the human race. That's what we call ourselves. We're the human race. And in my mind, there's not much difference between myself and the fly that's on my wall. I'm still gonna squish the fly that's on my wall. Don't get me wrong, but I don't really see much difference between these different life forms. Even single-celled organisms have a social structure if you really look at it. But it's like deer running through the forest. They're social animals. Wolves running through the forest. They're all social animals. Ants are social animals. Beetles are social animals. So when we talk about consciousness and self-preservation, the self-knowledge of knowing who you are and where you are, I think that's all relative. In our state, as humans, we know. Well, I'm going to say in our developed society, we see where we are on this planet in relation to this planet and in relation to where we are in our universe. But the ants that go walking around in your yard, their colony is their planet, and your yard is their universe. They might not know about what's outside of that universe, but they definitely know who and where they are. Otherwise, what would they be doing? How would they have any idea who the queen was? They operate with pheromones. They operate in ways that we can't comprehend. So if you really want to talk about a genealogical difference, look at how advanced these other animals are. They're blind. Ants are blind, and they know who each other are by the way that they walk, the way that they move, their vibrational pattern in the earth when they're walking around on the ground. They can understand and smell direction. We can't do that. I mean, it's not like in Scooby-Doo when Shaggy and Scooby can smell the direction of a giant sandwich that's being left as bait in a kitchen so that they can get, caught by the net that they trapped 10 minutes earlier. We can't do that. Smell permeates everything, but like my dog, she's laying down right behind me, right there, and she can smell so many more things than I can, and I often wonder what her world is like. But if you look at me, like an American male versus a Canadian male, or a Guatemalan male, or a Colombian male, or an African male, or an Egyptian male, or a British male, the list could go on and on. We all smell the same things. We all look at the same stars at night. We all perceive our reality the same way, much in the same way. So what is this whole idea that people are different in that way? Like that they're so fundamentally different that they're less than or more than. I understand the difference between cultures, and I understand the difference between, where you come from, how you live your life, your societal structure. I understand all these differences, but that doesn't mean that one group of people is better than another. It's been said in the scientific community that we all come from stardust, that this is what we're made up of, the elements in the earth, plus the elements that have been found in comets and asteroids. This is what our body mechanics are made from. Our cellular structures are made from this, and this is partially what sets us aside from other living things, like some plants and some animals. Also, the idea of consciousness. We're all conscious beings in one way or another, but especially among the human group. I've even heard the argument said that people that are from like the African descent, not necessarily people that are black or whatever, but people that are African descent are different than people of, I think, Eastern European descent are different from Neanderthals. And I've even heard it said that there's a racial divide, like a culturally based racial divide between people that are from the Neanderthal bloodline versus a European bloodline versus an Eastern or African bloodline. I don't really know how to respond to that. I'll be honest, because it adds more fuel to the fire. It's saying, okay, so before, the biggest problem was, white people versus black people, brown people, yellow people, red people, whatever, and all those groups against another group. And then now it's like, oh, so you have white folks that are from the European descent and these slightly olivier white folks that are from a Neanderthal background who have large foreheads and prominent brows and massive mustaches. Am I any different than anybody else? If you cut me, don't I bleed? Yeah, I went there. I totally did. What are you going to do about it? So, this is my point. Okay? We all come from the same planet. If you know somebody who comes from another planet, give them a high five for me, because that must have been a really long trip. So, we all come from the same place. Why do we need to really bicker and fight about who comes from where and who's taking whose job? It goes so much deeper than that. Now, if you look at it like this, the average American, what you make as a minimum wage, and the way that our job structure is supposed to be, like work safety and things, I don't think that they have like an OSHA kind of stuff in Mexico or in other countries. But if you look at it like this, like I've worked for people on like a day labor thing, and most of my coworkers were not from America. They were from places like Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico. And our employer hired these men because he believed that he could get away with not paying them a fair wage. Now, if you look at, there's a documentary called Living on $1. And these young men, they were in college, they went to a very small village in South America, Central America. And in that village, the people on average will live on $1 a day or less. So they took, I think it was 6 weeks, and they lived on $1 a day or less. And they understood the struggle, and they understood how these people live and what they've done to make the best of it. So some of these young men that I was working with, they might make $40 that day. They might make $20 that day in a day. So coming from where they come from, doing this job, which I was working as a tree cutter. I was working kind of as an arborist. So the average pay wage for a tree climber is around $15 to $20 an hour. This guy was paying $5 or $10 a job. So if you did 5 jobs that day, you would get $50. As opposed to, if you were a field worker or something like that in Mexico or Guatemala, Colombia, whatever it is that you might be doing down there as a farmer, you wouldn't be making $50 a day. You wouldn't be making $5 a day. So these men would live together in a small apartment, 5-10 of them at a time. They would live in a hotel room or something, and then they would send the money back home, because that money going back to them was just so much more money. But it's because of the greed of certain people that this was even allowed to happen. And when I showed up for the job, I had all my own gear. I spent like $1,500 on collected gear to climb trees professionally. And I showed up to the job expecting what I was going to be paid on the phone, which was $15 an hour. I worked 14 hours that day, and I made nothing. I didn't make a penny. I put my life in danger all day that day. Climbing trees, cutting off limbs, lowering them down. I was being very professional about this, and I was the only one who had any sort of training in this, which I found was kind of appalling, because we were working on people's properties, we were working next to people's houses, and these men, I applaud their courage, but they didn't know what they were doing, and it was extremely dangerous for themselves and everybody else around them. But they did it because it was a cheap buck. Like, for the guy, the employer was doing it because they were cheap work. These men were doing it because they need to feed their families in another country. So if you can make $50 in a day or $100 in 2 days, and you send that home, that's a third of what they might make in a year in a few days. So you can kind of understand where these people are coming from. When at the same time, myself as a Native American, I live here, I was born here, I grew up here. For myself, trying to find decent work, it's extremely difficult because there are so many employers out there who are willing to cheat someone else for a wage. Now, like I was saying before, if I was going to go to another country, I would go through the processes. I would get what work I could find for the time. But I would go and become a citizen of that nation, and I would do what I could to gain an education, to get a decent job, to be a fair wage worker, to pay into that system to help my fellow man. And unfortunately, that's not really done here. It's just mind-blowing to me. I've worked a couple of jobs like that. These people, they show up, they get their money, they go home, you know what I mean? But they're not being paid a fair wage, and it's because of a racial divide sometimes, They think like, oh, well, I'll just go hire this guy, he's disposable, I can use him for a day and give him $10 and he's going to be happy as a pig in shit. And the crime is further, it goes deeper than illegal immigration. It goes a lot further into cheating your fellow human. If we're going to still be operating in a money and wage-based economy instead of a resource-based economy, you don't have to treat people the way that you want to be treated. But if we're in a resource-based economy, this wouldn't really be so bad now, would it? When you're responsible for your own self, and it's not like you can just go to the supermarket and buy a bag of soybeans. You'd have to grow those soybeans. You'd have to grow that rice. You'd have to make something of yourself to trade to somebody else that's of equal value. When you don't have dollars to spend, you have to spend your own ingenuity and your own creativity and your own gifts. Everybody's born with a set of gifts. I don't understand this whole idea behind racism, which is just fake bullcrap anyway. We're all humans, and I think it's preposterous that there are people in this world still today that will view someone that's different than them as less than them. It's okay to be different, but it's not okay to be segregated, and it's not okay to not be together. Everybody is different. I'm different from my brother. I'm different from my sisters. I'm different from my mom, my dad, my whole family. I'm different from them, and they are different than the other ones. It just goes down this line. Everybody is an individual. Nobody is cattle. Nobody is something to be owned. And simply because you come from a certain area does not mean that you have the right to bash or talk ill or speak ill about another person. Now, as far as the sensitivity thing is concerned, I laugh at everybody. I think that people are genuinely funny, and I'm not laughing at their race or their DNA or something like that. It just, I think people are funny. I think what people do are funny. If someone has a bad hair day, I might be like, he has funny hair, but it's completely innocent. And, people getting so sensitive about political correctness, and people being so sensitive about what somebody says about them or what somebody says about their activity, like LARPing. I saw this thing on YouTube, and it's like live action role play. It's like a LARP, and these people, they live out their fantasies from a video games, it's kind of like cosplay, but they actually do it, Still dress up, and their alternate ego will be like, oh, I'm a wizard or I'm an elf, and whatever the case may be, and they go out and they play a video game in real life. And I saw this video and I was stunned. These guys are like totally into it. They are like completely immersed in this, and I couldn't stop laughing because I remember I did that when I was a kid, and it brought back so many memories of being a kid and pretending to be something else. And there are communities out there that this is what they do, and I couldn't stop laughing. I just thought it was so funny. I don't know. Am I an insensitive prick, or am I just a fan of comedy? I thought it was really funny. Some people might think that what I do is really funny. I sit in drum circles, and I play drums, and I play crystal singing bowls, and I burn incense, and I eat granola. I mean, people think that I'm a funny guy, too. And a lot of people make fun of me. I don't really care. Genuinely, a lot of what they say is very funny. I think that we all kind of just need to loosen up a little bit, realize that we're all people. We all do silly, funny things. And people do funny things. I mean, come on. I'm not going to say, grow a pair, but I mean, seriously. Learn to laugh at yourself. If we're constantly in this super sensitive society, we're all going to be chafed for the rest of our lives. And I don't want to see, chafing come down to absolute rawness. When you walk down the street and you look at somebody and you smile and oh, he's laughing at my hat, or he's laughing at my pants. Come on now. Let's all just grow up a little bit. Stop calling these, racial identification. Let's just be people. Let's just be human together, shall we? Thanks for listening to Meep Radio. This is Kermit the Frog signing off. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/MeepTruthRadio and Twitter @MeepRadio. Thank you.